Welcome to Sustainable Tucson's November monthly meeting, our Sustainability Spotlight program. The mission of Sustainable Tucson is to build an equitable community that thrives long into the future in harmony with our natural desert environment. We're a nonprofit grassroots organization that builds regional resilience and sustainability through community engagement, awareness raising, and advocacy. We will be recording so that you can either rewatch or recommend to your friends that they go to our YouTube channel after it's posted and watch the presentation if they're not able to be here tonight. We'll have announcements of other events at the end, or you can put them also in the chat. You can put questions in the chat. We're going to take some of the questions when Ken finishes his presentation. I must say, I'm very excited about tonight's program, featuring and focusing on pollinators, which is an important topic in this day and age. Aside from the beauty of the pollinators and the flowering plants that they make possible, I like food. And I think we all do. And we can thank our pollinators for so much of our food. They're important for us in many respects. So tonight, to indicate what's really going on with the bugs, and if we're going to have an insect apocalypse or pollinator profusion, we're going to hear from Kenneth Kingsley. Dr. Kingsley earned his PhD in entomology at the University of Arizona in 1985. His career has combined conservation biology and integrated pest management as working as a consultant for private industry and government agencies, everything from local to national. He's had an adventurous career exploring wildlife and plants in a range of habitats, from Hawaiian burial caves to mountaintops in Nevada. He's worked in 11 national parks and 10 states, underwater, in deserts, in riparian woodlands, and in mountain talus fields. He's conducted surveys on organisms ranging from bacteria to bighorn sheep. I think we can say a key word for career is diversity. And since the topic tonight is a crucial piece of our concerns about biodiversity, it works very well. So his work has led him to the understanding that people have made a terrible mess of things, but we can change and make the world safe for ourselves and for most other living beings.
Come on.
And we're going to ask again that anyone who's not the speaker is muted. And I'm going to turn things over to Ken.
Let me share my screen again, because I seem to have gotten lost. And here we go. So this question was given to me in an email by Paula with an invitation to speak with you. And I responded, of course, I'm happy to be here, but who is this guy? What's he doing? I became an entomologist when I was in second grade, when one of my fellow second grade students brought a cocoon to show and tell in Mrs. Lair's second grade class. And over the weekend, out of the cocoon came a cecropia moth, flew around the inside of our classroom, laying sterile eggs, and died, landing on my desk. I figured that was an omen. I did my bachelor's degree at Prescott College, working in riparian communities. My master's at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, working in Death Valley. And my doctorate at the University of Arizona, working primarily on pest mosquitoes at the agro-urban interface and developing some skill in biological control of pest insects. I went on to work as an environmental consultant, conducting surveys and developing conservation plans, primarily with 14 years working with SWCA, Environmental Consultants, which has offices ranging from Honolulu, Hawaii to Portland, Maine. I got to travel around the country and learn some things. Then I retired in 2005 and became a full-time volunteer, mostly with the National Park Service, but also the Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and Arizona State Parks. The biggest thing I've accomplished recently was working with my mentor, who is still a close friend after 54 years of working together, putting together a 2-volume work on riparian research and management. I work as a volunteer at the University of Arizona and at Mission Garden as an informal pest control advisor. The question that Paula put to me was, is there an insectocopalyx or a pollinator profusion? What's the problem? What do the numbers show? What do we know? Frankly, there's a great deal of confusing information. You read the big magazines, you'll find that there's multiple instances of insects declining. There are some wonderful books on the subject, great detail. And we have had scientists warning us that we're losing our insects all over the world. On the other hand, we've seen some huge insect invasions of creepy crawlies swarming US towns on the road, grasshoppers, bed bugs invading, mosquitoes growing. Wait, does America suddenly have a record number of bees? A couple of excellent articles have appeared recently that look at that question and try to make some sense out of what's actually going on. After the initial shocking articles came out, the scientists who studied these things determined that some of the work was alarmist by bad design, that the way it was done came up with a worse picture than was actually there. And in fact, some of the information that was coming in was undermining the credibility of conservation science. In United States long-term ecological research sites, there's over 5,000 time series over many years at 68 sites showed some taxa went up, increased, some decreased, but overall, there's no apparent change in our long-term ecological research sites. Subsequently, more rational heads decided we need to move on from the insect apocalypse narrative and engage with evidence-based insect conversation. It's clear that something's not right in our understanding of what's going on, and we need to advocate for a balanced perspective to serve both public and scientific interests. Why is it difficult to know for sure? Well, insects are very complex, and understanding their populations is extremely difficult and challenging. Sometimes we get confused by some species that have what we call local eruptions, huge numbers of butterflies, crickets, other creatures seem to be coming out all over. And people here in Arizona and elsewhere are getting stung to death by swarms of bees. If you go out in the spring to a place where there are cottonwood trees, you're likely to see them covered by tent caterpillars. If you park your car underneath, it'll get covered by caterpillars and caterpillar poop. One of the things we know is that the primary driving force behind insect populations in our area is the amount of rainfall that we get and the timing of the rainfall. And that's very hard to predict or to keep good data on. Around the world, people have been using the windshield test and seeing how many bugs land on their car windshields as they're driving around. This is my vehicle after 1,228 miles without washing. Hardly a bug to be seen. And then the next week, I drove 50 miles and ended up driving through a swarm of butterflies. All one kind of butterflies, the common American snout butterfly, which is shown up in the upper right-hand corner. 50 miles and my windshield was a mess. 1,200 miles and not a bug to be found. It's complicated. There are a lot of unknowns and no baseline. Most insects are of no economic value and little particular interest to anybody to study their populations. So there's a great lack of study. In the academic world, research habits do not foster long-term studies of insect populations. You got to publish or perish. There's no or very little funding, and it's very difficult to study populations. Too many factors are potentially involved. Most insects have no economic or health-related value, so they're not worth studying. And there are not very many people, even in the academic world of entomologists, who are interested or capable of doing the work to arrive at valid conclusions. On the fate of insects, the most troubling thing is how much is still unknown. Without a doubt, all is not well. There are fewer scientists studying insects, and that's dangerous. With the outbreak of some mosquito-borne diseases, there were not enough medical entomologists available to meet the demands to respond to the need. And it's further confused by hype. There are people and nonprofit organizations that benefit by scaring people about what's happening to the insects. So Save the Bees by the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a group of lawyers. What are they going to do to save the bees? They're going to get involved in lawsuits. It's useful, but it doesn't directly save the bees. And bee washing hurts bees and misleads consumers because it misdirects our attention. Here, the take action at greater good is advertising the need to save honeybees. Can anyone here, looking at that picture, tell me that that's a honeybee? That is a flower fly. It is not a honeybee. And any entomologist looking at it will say, what? What are these guys saying? Save the flower flies? Yeah, probably more important than saving the honeybee. There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. More research is necessary to support conclusions, but it's easier to sell newspapers and advertising if your article is the insect apocalypse is here than it is to publish an honest article that says more research is needed by entomologists. More good scientists are desperately needed. But there's a funding shortage, not much money in the process. So, why does it matter? What do we know for sure? Insects are important to us and other living things. What? Me worry? Well, most of us like to eat. Most of the described multicellular organisms on this planet are insects. We know that we need the insects, but they don't need us. If insects were to vanish, our environment would completely crumble. NASA has figured out that the trip to Mars that is in the planning works needs to bring some insects to clean up the wastes of the people who are traveling and to provide food for the people who are traveling to Mars. We know that 75 to 80% of flowering plants rely on animal pollinators. Most wildflowers depend on pollinators. Whole Foods published this series of pictures showing what your produce choices look like with bees. And this is what we would have if we didn't have bees in our grocery store. A third of all human foods and beverages depend upon pollinators. Lots of money, more than 150 food crops, 1,000 economic plant species. We cannot calculate the actual value of these critters. So who are pollinators? Well, we got ants and bats in alphabetical order, bees, beetles, birds, butterflies, flies, and moths. Tonight, I'm only going to talk about bees and butterflies. The rest of them is a whole nother lecture. Recently published is an article called Insect Decline in the Anthropocene, Death by 1,000 Cuts. And it has this wonderful diagram showing all of the factors that are killing off our insect trend. Excuse me for a second. There are multiple interacting causes of death of insects. Over in the pear capital of the world, in China, there are no pollinators left. The pollinators are the elderly people. They climb up into the pear trees with brushes dipped in pollen. It's not as economical as having bees or other native insects. We don't want to end up like that. So let's talk about bees for a minute. The order Hymenoptera, about 25,000 described species and maybe 15,000 or more that are not described yet by scientists. Here in the United States, there are 4,337 species that have been described as of last year. Most are solitary, most are small, but a quarter of all known bee species have not been seen in 30 years. The ones I'm personally most concerned about and involved in are bumblebees. We have very good evidence of declines of bumblebees around our country, partly at least due to climate change. Again, also partly at least due to habitat change. But we know now, as of recent research, that rising temperatures cause an imbalance in the food of bumblebees, a mixing up of our nectar microbes, sugars, and bumblebee foraging preferences. Literally, some bumblebees now get sick or drunk when they come to feed on flowers. That used to be okay, but now, because of changes in the temperature cycles, it doesn't work well for them. Of our species of bumblebees in the United States, 5 are critically endangered, 2 are endangered, 5 are vulnerable. The majority are probably okay. The reasons for the losses include diseases introduced by international transportation, intercontinental transportation of bumblebees and honeybees and their relatives, the loss of habitat, pesticides. Some species of bumblebees are very sensitive, competition from honeybees and introduced species, isolation and inbreeding, climate changes, and there's always an unknown factor. Of our more than 4,000 species of native bees, it has been estimated with limited evidence that more than half are in decline. Almost all are solitary, they're difficult to detect, and they're very difficult to identify. So not just anybody can go out and say, hey, what's going on with the bees? There are a lot of different kinds of bees out there. Fortunately, over the last several years, the U.S. Geological Survey has developed a center for native bee inventory and identification. And they've enlisted the National Park Service. Here's a picture of me sitting on a mountain in Great Basin National Park, gathering bees to send off to Patuxent, Maryland for identification and putting into this larger program of monitoring and identifying native bees. It's now widespread across the country. Of course, like all government agencies, it is threatened by a change in funding. Now let's talk about honeybees. They were first introduced to this continent in 1622 at Jamestown, earlier by Spanish probably. They're major pollinators of crops and wild plants. If you look on Google for honeybee decline articles, you'll find over 17,000 articles. And every year, for several years, I've seen articles announcing how badly the honeybees have suffered from loss. Beekeepers lost 48.2 of their managed hives the threats in the last, and not in between April 1, 2022 to April 1, 2023. But honeybees are invasive. They're pervasive. They're feral. They're not native. They come in, they clean out the nectar and the pollen from our native flowers. A hive unit month, one beehive for a month, therefore, consumes the equivalent of thousands of native bees. And a 40 hive apiary residing on wildlands for 3 months collects the pollen equivalent of 4 million wild bees. Some years that doesn't matter. There's plenty to go around. Other years, it's kind of slim pickings for the natives. Does America suddenly have a record number of bees? The Washington Post lists the number of US herds, the fastest growing herds, domesticated groups of animals, are bee colonies. The largest growth has been in the state of Texas, where in 2012, the real estate taxation laws were changed to make it so that if you had 5 beehives on 5 acres of land, your land would be taxed as agricultural land. And so everybody who owned 5 acres or more went out and got beehives, so they would save a ton of money in taxation. In our country, the total value of pollination in the United States in 2023, the biggest crop was almonds, over $300 million worth of almonds. And literally, the majority of the commercially managed beehives in our country are shipped to California, to the almond fields for pollinating the almonds. They do great at pollinating the almonds, but then they have to go somewhere after the almond season is done. What do you do with a beehive that's hungry and you have to find food for it? You try to find wild lands where you can put it for free or cheap on Forest Service land. Yes, the United States honeybee population is at the highest it has ever been. And that is not a good thing for our native pollinators. Nobody really seems to care much about flies. We have over 150,000 described species of flies, and a third of them are pollinators. Many are economic important decomposers, breaking down waste. And many are important as pest control agents because the larvae feed and the adults feed on pest insects. Butterflies, we have about 700 species in the United States. Many of them, 27, are listed as endangered. Now, why are more butterflies listed as endangered than any other kind of insect? Because butterflies are the prettiest. And because butterflies are fairly easy to count, and butterflies are fairly easy to follow. We have across the nation, the North American Butterfly Association has members organized for the last 50 years to go out and do butterfly counts. And what we have seen from the citizen scientists involved in counting butterflies is there has been a steady decline in the numbers seen. Here in Arizona, the Patagonia, Arizona butterfly count has been going on for decades, but we have seen it gradually, constantly decreasing, both in terms of the abundance, the total number of butterflies seen, and the number of species. Why does all this matter? How does this problem reflect areas affecting other aspects of biodiversity, urban ecology, food supply, etc.? What do we know for sure? This idea of 1,000 cuts, you look at that, you will see that every single one is caused by us. Our current world population as of last week was 8 billion people and growing constantly. The population change in the Americas has been astonishing. The human modification of terrestrial ecosystems affects the whole world. Humans are driving 1 million species to extinction. Wildlife populations have fallen by 73% since I've been a professional ecologist. We're seeing global plant extinctions 500 times faster than they would be. We're seeing more than 1 in 3 tree species worldwide faces extinction. It's all because of what we do. Only 6% is now figured to be climate change, but 50% is changes in land use. This is a change in land use. What do you think could live there or there? This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. I'm sure you're all well aware of this. That blue star is my house, by the way, in the middle of urban Tucson. And we've just had some brand new science go into studying the effects of vehicles on bees. One of the great bee scientists working today gone out and studied this and has just published this information in the last week. We create agricultural landscapes with no diversity. We use toxic chemicals, and they're becoming increasingly toxic. We're seeing global change, climate change, and our newly elected president believes climate change is a hoax. We have seen that we have created a better world for mosquitoes, bed bugs, and cockroaches than for bees and butterflies and actually people. So what can we do? We know enough to act now. There are well-founded solutions. We need to stop doing some of the stuff we've been doing. We need to collaborate for success across all landscapes. We need to take 8 simple steps: restore and create, convert lawns into diverse natural habitats, grow native plants, plant and let grow. Out of 227 samples of milkweeds across 19 sites in California, 64 different pesticides were found, including in those that were sold by nurseries as potential food for monarch butterflies. We need to buy only from growers who we can trust have shown us they're not poisoning the insects that we're trying to feed. We need to think globally and act globally, locally. The Arizona Native Plant Society has a plant list of suitable plants for insects in our area. We need to reduce pesticide and herbicide use. We need to limit use of exterior lighting. We need to prevent soap runoff in our driveways. And we need to work to counter negative perceptions of insects through such wonderful events as the Arizona Insect Festival, the Butterfly Magic Pavilion at the Tucson Botanical Garden. There are good guidelines on how to work toward a world that values insects. We can learn. Our today can be someone's before or baseline. We, citizens, can participate in butterfly counts with our local Southeast Arizona Butterfly Association. Those of us who are inspired need to become educators and ambassadors and advocates for insect conservation through the Sabino Canyon Naturalist or other organizations, including Sustainable Tucson. Tucson needs you. We need to get involved and vote. There's a wonderful consortium called the Tucson Bee Collaborative that is developed between several organizations here that are working to protect our native bees. The Xerces Society is an international organization for protecting the little things that run the world. So I now am ready to turn this over to our other two speakers. Please, if you have been inspired to be interested in further information, here is my email. I have a multi-page bibliography of all of the research articles that I have put into this talk and many YouTube videos and other sources of information for you. So if you would like a copy of that, I will email it to you if you email to me. If you have questions, I would be happy to entertain them. If they're complex, we can dialogue later. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're good.
Okay. So, Ken, thank you. This was fantastic. And I think a kind of an eye-opener for many of us who don't always see quite that diversity of the pollinators that you were talking about. We can take a couple of minutes for if there are some urgent questions now. Otherwise, there will be time after we hear about pollinator gardening. Does anyone want to put up his or her hand? No? Okay, well, we're sure we'll have questions afterwards. At the moment, I would like to introduce Lauren Jankowski. Lauren is one of the two former members of the UA Ecological Restoration Club who wrote a successful grant for construction of the Pollinator Equity Project's new native plant nursery, that's important, and associated plantings at the garden there, and also oversaw the early stages of the project's construction. Lauren last spring graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in conservation biology and is currently an intern with Arizona Game and Fish Department in the small mammal program. And she has just recently had that internship extended. And most of the time now she is working out in the field and probably seeing a lot of the insects that Ken was showing us. So I would like to turn this over to Lauren now to tell us about the Pollinator Equity Project. One of the activities here in the area that is addressing some of the concerns that Ken mentioned, and is one of the things that we're trying to do something about with all of that. Lauren, take it over.
All right. Hi, everyone. As I was introduced, I am Lauren. I am one of the co-authors, and I was the co-manager of the Pollinator Equity Project, which, as we said, was funded by the University of Arizona. The main goal of the project was to raise native pollinator plants through a propagation process, to share throughout the community within Tucson, especially with like schools, libraries, community gardening projects, and areas we found that were low scoring on Tucson's Tree Equity Index, that is run by the city of Tucson. So we ended up getting our funding last March. It took us like about a year through the process. And in my time while we were there, we mainly focused on building the nursery, getting irrigation in place at the Rincon Heights Community Garden, which is where the grant like takes place, and also planting all of our parent plants to be propagated and used in our nursery. And since I've been left, I asked Melody. Melody Peters is the community garden manager for the Rincon Heights Community Garden, and she's been kind of taking it over during the summer. And as we've transitioned from like different student bodies who are in charge of the grant, and I wrote a few little bullet points that she told me of like what is their current progress since I'm no longer there. They're still in their continuing propagation phase. They hope within a few weeks that they'll be able to do some more donations. We've only donated so far to Tucson Clean and Beautiful, but in a situation like this, if any of you guys know of any projects going on specifically, or any schools that are starting up gardens that you think it would benefit to have native pollinators at, please feel free to reach out to me or Melody Peters at the garden. Just for those ideas, we're always open to hearing about other things in Tucson going on that could use our help. They've been having a lot of volunteer work sessions where they try to collaborate with different organizations in Tucson as well. And that is one of the ways I was supposed to come on here and tell you guys how you could get involved with the project if you're interested at all. A big thing is donating time. That is our like biggest donation that we love, is anyone who loves to come out, and even if it's gardening for 30 minutes or 3 hours, any time is very helpful. They tend to do the work days now on Sundays and Fridays, Friday evenings and Sunday mornings. It's not as crucial time-wise now as it used to be since it's cooling down, which is wonderful for the work sessions. But in those kind of situations, it's a lot of like helping with the propagation, watering plants, or just helping like weeding throughout the garden. Or when we are in the phase of donating, we've been doing a lot of like soil separation, because the soil we dug up, getting some of that nasty stuff out that we don't want, and using that for potting. So if that's really interesting to anyone, that's a lot of the volunteer work we do. And with other donations, our second big donation is any pots, because that is something that ends up requiring a lot of money, and we're trying to save as much of our funding as we can to use towards the plants. And eventually we're trying to build a seed library as well, which is going to be open to the public. It should be installed. I actually reached out with Melody, hopefully by December, they were saying. And that's another way just to spread awareness and spread native pollinators throughout the community. Because a big thing we noticed in Rincon Heights, specifically in the Pie Island neighborhoods, in that area, is there's a lot of landscape that doesn't have native pollinators. So we kind of want to urge not only students and staff, but also individuals in the community to be turning towards a more native approach when landscaping. Besides that, for involvement, if you do have any other questions, I can put Melody's contact down below, because she's the one who's like mainly focused on it right now since she's in Tucson, and I sadly am no longer in Tucson. But if you guys have any other questions or want me to expand on anything else, let me know.
Are there any quick questions at this point for Lauren? Actually, I do have one. What are some of the types of native pollinator plants that you're growing there and distributing?
So one of our big ones, it was kind of based on which of our parent plants, like our first round, did really well. Sadly, we did lose some. But we've been propagating a lot of Greg's Mistflower, a lot of folder wings, a lot of tuberosa, and then our Mexican petunias too, for like a bigger flowering plant did really well. So that's a lot of our big ones. We do have some agave that we aren't propagating from, but we have just been raising for donations from that we had like Tucson Clean and Beautiful has been a wonderful help, and they gave us some of their plants they didn't need to help us like start up a little sooner. So those are some of our main ones right now that we've been focused on.
Okay, great. Well, as Lauren said, growing native pollinator plants is certainly one thing that is going to be important for encouraging our local pollinators to do well.
I've got a question,
Yes.
Lauren.
Yeah.
You may have said this, but how do you connect with people who want to have plantings, and do you help them put the things in the ground, or you just deliver plants to them?
So I haven't been a part of this phase because it happened after my time at the university, but a big way that we were able to meet different organizations that we're working with or hearing about the places that needed plants was actually when we worked at the Tucson Organic Gardeners Fair. We did like a lot of networking, got to meet a bunch of cool, wonderful people who are all very interested and supportive of native pollinators, as well as schools that Tucson Clean and Beautiful know about. I know right now it's only been donating phase, but I think later on when the donation phase is a lot larger because it's only been like here and there a few plants. When it is more large scale, the intention is that members within the schools club and members within the garden go and physically help with the plantings as well as like educating people first of all how to plant because not everyone knows how to plant something in a garden, as well as like what pollinators they're planting, what kind of pollinators will be like attracted to what they're planting and like why it's important.
Thank you.
We have two questions in the chat. I guess I skimmed by fairly quickly with the name of the organization. It is the Pollinator Equity Project, and it's located in the Rincon Heights Community Garden. And Lauren, can you tell us where that is exactly?
Yeah, so it's on 8th Street, south of the University of Arizona's campus by like 4 or 5 blocks between Highland Avenue and Park Avenue as like the main north and the south roads. It's on 8th Street.
Okay. And if you,
You should be able to look it up online too, and there is like the location of it if that is too confusing.
okay. And I think that there is also a nice Facebook page for the Pollinator Equity Project. In fact, I got a picture, a post just earlier today.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment?
I do see another one in the chat that is asking where is the native plant nursery located for the pollinator project? Um, from Millie and Keith. The nursery is located within the garden. There was like this big empty space next to one of our sheds that we like dug some trenches with and like made our own nursery. So it's at the Rincon Heights Community Garden. All of our like everything that happens for the grant and the project happens at the garden.
Okay. In that case, we're going to turn to another source of native pollinator plantings, and that is Sustainable Tucson's Habitat Restoration Committee, led by Robin Motzer. Robin has a long history, both before her time and in her own experience with farming and working the land. And as she says, to quote her, flora, fauna, food, farming, and freedom are infused in my life, and restoration conservation is a part of my soul. The Habitat Restoration Group was formed in 2020 when she came to us with the idea that we needed to have some pollinator gardens planted around Tucson. And she will be telling us about that work and the partnerships that went into it. and all of the planning that they've been doing. But a little bit more about her background. She received a certified organic land care professional certification through the Northeast Organic Farming Association, otherwise known as NOFA, and the Organic Farming Association. Organic land care is a sustainable ecological landscaping system that promotes and enhances biodiversity and soil biological activity. And Robin has been working with this for quite some time. Okay, can you all see that okay? Take it away, Robin.
Anyway, okay, that's where you want to start. All right. Thank you. So this is our habitat restoration group working with the city of Tucson Parks and Rec. And we're at Himmel Park, which Himmel Park means heaven and sky in German. We work with Tucson Rec to get pesticides out of parks and get pollinator gardens in the parks. So it was very fun. They're very open to soil health, which is music to our ears because that's the key to everything. And we worked with not only soil health, but we did a couple of little tests on organic type natural ways to maybe have healthier turf and plants. And they were very open. So they did 2 test parks, one in Reed Park and one in Silver. And they had a contractor they had a contract with, and everything was set up. But I heard recently that it kind of just all fell apart. So we need you to help Habitat Restoration Group and get those parks back up with their organic land care. So contact Robin at sustainabletucson.org and let's make this stuff happen. We can all work together. And just like Ken was saying, you know, we need to increase collaboration and shift paradigms and reduce harm. Okay. Is some before, during, and afters. This is a school. It's actually a garden for traumatized children. And we use native pollinator plants. And we actually bought them from a small local nursery, Spadefoot Nursery. And part of our ethos is we want to support small local business. And we had a lot of fun. Lots of people turned out to plant, and you can see the after picture in the lower left. So that, look how beautiful that is compared to dirt. Dirt. Okay, next. We just envision pollinator gardens in every ward, every community, every HOA, everywhere. So if you want to have a pollinator garden in your neighborhood or community or school, please contact me. We've got grant money, we've got volunteers, we've got partners. We've recently partnered with Tucson Organic Gardeners, and thank you to Keith and Millie who are with us tonight. We're really excited to be working with you. And actually, we do have a school that reached out to us, but I'm not hearing back. So we're going to need a location. So if any of you have a place, like maybe Lauren knows something, I'll talk to Melody because she started with our Habitat Restoration Group. I know her very well. I'll talk to Melody, maybe Ken, maybe you know someplace. So think about it and let me know. We're also for bigger projects like the Santa Cruz River and the Rito River restoration. We wrote a grant for doing that type of work, which was very, that would have been a huge project. But anyway, I'm glad to hear that it's being done. Okay, next. So we teach that we are nature and we're connected. What we do to one, we do to another. So let's feed our soil natural, leave the leaves. The most simple thing, the most simple behaviors we can change are stop blowing leaves and twigs away. And that's blowing away all the insects. And then we bag them up in plastic and send them to the landfill. It's insane. So stop doing that. And wow, that would be a lot of less noise pollution too, and all kinds of stuff. So that would solve a lot of problems, just stopping that. Anyway, love putting our native pollinator gardens next to food gardens. So that's the picture on top there. You can see all the luscious plants on the left. Those are food. That's organic food gardens. And they actually sell some of that organic food. Community Gardens of Tucson, this is one of their plots. The gardeners at the Presidio Garden in the middle of Tucson actually sell their fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. So that's what we need more of. We need more community gardens selling at farmers markets, farm to table businesses, and we need actually more co-ops and farmers markets, and all do the most amazing things very easily. But we have to work together to make it happen. So next slide, please. These are just some close-up photos of the plants, and we designed everything ourselves. Designing gardens is a lot of fun. Again, we can do the native pollinator gardens, we can do organic food gardens, we can do healing gardens. There's so much opportunity. We can talk about agroforestry. There's just so many cool things that we could integrate within Tucson. I can see it happening in Tucson and everywhere. It's all about education and habit changes. Next slide, please. These are more of some close-ups of really cool native pollinator plants. And I got to tell you, planting a garden, it's just bliss. I mean, everybody in that photo, we were just like in a Zen state. It was so beautiful underneath the mesquite trees. It was cool and shady, and then we have beautiful plants around us, and we're creating beauty. We're doing good. And there's a great artist mural in this garden, and just a lot of fun elements we can incorporate with artists and musicians. We can make a little planting pollinator festival. There's so many cool things. So please contact me. Next slide. So to wrap it up, thanks for your attention and time, and thanks for coming. Our mission at Habitat Restoration is to advocate for, develop, and deliver regenerative solutions that restore nature's waterways and biodiverse systems utilizing nature's remedies and building materials. So we are committed to bringing all of these practices to Tucson. Everything we do is holistic and natural and fun. So join us, contact me at robin@sustainabletucson.org. And I'm a writer and an artist. I have a newsletter at robinmotzer.substack.com, and I talk about our projects, and I talk about the different advocacy, and pulling all of these things together in our communities is possible, and we need you to be a part of it. So thank you, everyone. Any questions?
You mentioned a project at Reed Park that has been abandoned or something. Is that right?
Well, I don't know the specifics because I just found this out, but the contractor that the city Parks and Recs hired no longer can fulfill their contract to do organic land care. So what exactly that means, you'd have to talk to Laura Hamway. She's the director at the city parks.
Okay. I live near Reed Park, and that might be a side project for neighborhood association or something. So thank you for telling us about that.
Wow, that would be really cool. Can you report back to me and let me know how that goes, or if you need any help making your
Yeah,
decision?
I can try.
Okay.
Yes.
This is Sandy Tarpinian. Robin, where is the pollinator garden in Himmel Park?
Okay, good question, Sandra. So here, I'm just going to give you a quick summary because 2 years ago we envisioned, and Melody Peters is a part of this. We and Vitas is on the call, and Stuart. We worked with the Tucson City Parks and Rec. Himmel Park Pollinator Garden is in front of the library right now. So that's on
Okay.
Boulevard, okay, on the corner there. So there already is an existing one, but we want to expand it many, many feet. And we want it all across the front of the library. And
Okay.
we're going to work with the library for educational programs and work with the local schools. We have a really great vision with all of it, but it was put on hold for a couple years because the county decided they wanted to remodel the
Yeah,
so
the libraries.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there was some flooding and different things that were happening. So the project's back on track, and the Pima County is presenting the new plans. So it's coming back around.
And which schools are, um, have their pollinator gardens next to their community garden, the food garden?
Right. Okay. So through Community Gardens of Tucson, we did Mary Meredith School, which is off of Speedway. And that school is for traumatized children. And it makes me tear up every time I think about it because these plants allow the children to go out in nature right outside their in their school grounds in a safe environment, and they can learn about the plants, they can learn about pollinators, and they can learn about organic food all right there on their school grounds. So if we had every school, can you imagine the behavioral changes that would happen? It would be magical. And nature needs us, we need nature. So I'm like this leader of we can do it. And I'm singing my tune daily.
I want to just point out, Laura has let us know the Himmel Park Pollinator Garden is on Treat, not Tucson Boulevard, Treat Avenue, not Tucson Boulevard.
Treat.
Treat.
Okay, I thought it was on the corner of Tucson and Treat, but thank you. We want it along Tucson Boulevard. So we wanted to extend out all along that front facade of the library.
Actually, Robin, may I interject here?
Please, Vitas, you live right there.
Yeah, the library is on the corner of Treat and First Street.
That's right. Okay.
So Tucson Boulevard is a couple blocks to the west. It's at the
Yeah.
west. It's at the west side of the library. And this is the east side of the library
Thank you.
of the park. You're welcome. And the projected pollinator garden that we talked about yesterday would be along First Street,
Right. Very
Just-
good.
directly north of the library.
Thank you.
That would
Okay.
be very exciting to have,
Yes.
definitely be a good thing. Okay.
It's Tucson Boulevard. I just want to say something really quick. So we also started with a project right on Tucson Boulevard in the historic water district. There's a water tower there, and City of Tucson and Tucson Water ended up saying no because of security issues with that historic water tower. But that would have been a beautiful pollinator garden right there on the corner of Tucson Boulevard. That's why I keep thinking Tucson Boulevard, Tucson and First. So anyway, we're out there trying, and the more people we have, the more we can do.
I've got a couple of, I think, short questions. First for Robin and then for Ken. Robin, are you taking names of potential volunteers for some of these projects? Is there a way that you were gathering and collecting?
Yes.
Okay, so people,
Yes.
they can send you a little chat or something if they want.
Yes.
Ken, if you're still there to answer, this might seem small, but you gave this list of the types of pollinators there are: ants, bats, bees, beetles, birds, butterflies, flies, and oh, I lost the last one. What was the other type of pollinator? So Ken may be gone. That means, does anybody
No, he
else?
should be here.
Moths.
Moths, thank you.
If you want any further information, please feel free to email me. It's the easiest way for me to communicate because of my hearing difficulty.
Will do.
Okay. And we will, of course, have the recording up on our YouTube channel and the link in the on the website probably by the end of the week, I hope. But as soon as possible, so that if you wanted to check any of the details in the slide presentation or in any of the talks, that will be a possibility for you. Ken was also gracious enough to send us a booklet that he has put together on pollinators, and I will be putting the link up on our website, and I'll put it in the Facebook page as well. So that would be an additional resource for anyone who's interested in pursuing this even further. Any final questions here? We're coming close to time to close. Well, if not, then I would like to thank Ken very much for a wonderfully informative presentation and a really great way to become much more aware of what's out there and what we need to do to preserve our insect pollinators and support them so that they will continue to support us. And thank you also to Lauren and definitely to Robin for indicating at least two of the ways in which you can get involved locally with supporting pollinators and pollinator plantings. There are a lot of plans coming up in the future for Habitat Restoration Committee and for the Pollinator Equity Project. And there are, in fact, other groups and organizations that do support pollinators. Tucson Organic Gardeners. I think Keith and Millie would want me to mention that.
Tucson Audubon?
Tucson Audubon. Yes, the Habitat at Home program through Tucson Audubon would be a really great way to learn more about what you can do in your home garden.